Why do you think that is easier to be understanding towards an Islamic culture or a Jewish culture that wears different things versus the Latter-day Saint culture?
Hello, Saints. My name is Jeff. I am a pastor in Utah, and I'm exploring everything I can about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, alongside my amazing, wonderful, beautiful, talented, awesome wife, Joy.
Hello.
And now that we've lived a year here in Utah, and you've been involved in a lot of the videos up to this point, we're meeting a lot of people.
Yeah, not just videos, but conversations with people.
That's right. And in those conversations with people, there is a very common question that people ask us.
Yes, we get asked often by Latter-day Saints what we find to be the most shocking or unique belief or practice of the Latter-day Saint Church.
And it makes sense that they're asking that question because, as I've explained many times on Hello Saints, we don't know a whole lot about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in broader Christianity, especially when you're in areas of the country like the Midwest or the South where there's not a high concentration of Latter-day Saints. And another question we'll get often from members of the church is, well, what are the things that you enjoy the most? Or a phrase that's commonly used, what kind of holy envy might you be developing for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? So we're going to talk about all of those things, starting with the things that most shock us and probably most evangelicals when learning about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So a couple things before we start. First of all, this list isn't in any particular order, and we both came up with our own list. So there might be some overlap, but we might have some unique things. And the first one is whenever I learned that members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints do not drink coffee or tea.
That was one of mine.
Yes. Okay, so why was that on your list as well?
A lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people in the world drink coffee and tea.
Right, but a lot of people also say curse words, and that's kind of normal, but we don't. It is kind of...
At least not on camera.
That's true. Yeah, and especially where we come from, not just in the Midwest, not just in the Bible Belt, but also in the evangelical church, we actually serve coffee at most of our churches.
I feel like we've actually been trained to offer coffee as a kind, welcoming gesture.
Yeah, even for me as a pastor, it's incredibly common if I walk down the hallway past someone and, hey, I haven't seen you in a minute. We should grab a cup of coffee this week. Or if somebody comes to me and like, hey, Pastor Jeff, I really feel like I need to process through some stuff. I'll usually say, hey, why don't we grab lunch or grab coffee and we can sit down and chat. So,
well, and I can't tell you how many times since we've moved here that we've known people are coming to visit and they're Latter-day Saint friends. And all of a sudden I'm like, I have nothing to offer because I have lots of coffee and tea, but not necessarily things that they can drink.
Yeah.
So I have learned that soda is the way. Soda is the key to the heart of the Latter-day Saints.
Or candy, or chocolate, or desserts, or cookies.
Sweets, yeah.
It's just so interesting that that's an adjustment that we have to make, and that Latter-day Saints have basically, since the days of Joseph Smith, they have not made coffee part of their culture. So
occasionally we offer it to our Latter-day Saint guests as a joke.
So far, nobody's gotten offended, and I hope nobody watching this gets offended. But it's something that definitely takes us by surprise. All right, your turn.
I would say kind of swinging in the other direction of like seriousness and maybe even sacredness. But the thing that has always feels a little bit uncomfortable to talk about, and I feel like it's hard to explain even to our evangelical friends, is baptizing for the dead.
Yeah, that was on my list as well. So members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have temples where they primarily do ordinances for those who have passed on before us. And they're ordinances that they do here on earth. They believe that they're things that have to take place here on earth. So they do go through these ordinances as well as individuals, but most of the time they're doing work in the temple for those who have gone before.
Tied to that practice and that belief, I think that there's a theme that we have discovered in learning and being around the culture more, that they feel much more connected, I think, to, on a spiritual level, to those that have come before us and after us.
Yeah, and learning about proxy work is so eye-opening to the Latter-day Saint paradigm because it really touches so much of what they do. So I didn't realize that there were actual Sunday morning church buildings that Latter-day Saints went to. I thought they did everything in the temple. That's actually where I thought they would go on Sunday mornings. But when I later found out that that is where these ordinances are done, primarily for those who have passed on, it completely transformed my understanding of what is important to them and opened my eyes to various doctrinal positions or theological beliefs they have, namely that they believe that those who have gone before us have an opportunity in the next life to receive the plan of salvation.
And I think in practice, from our perspective, the thing that's interesting about that is that not only they believe that, but they spend a lot of their time here on earth, a lot of their time invested in doing ordinances for the dead, which is, I don't know that we have anything like that.
And even though as Protestant evangelicals, we don't believe that the Bible teaches proxy work based on our paradigm and our understanding of things, I think that the more I've learned about it, the less I'm shocked by it, the more I can understand it based on a Latter-day Saint belief of salvation. And the more I can understand why that would be something that's important to them, especially because most of the time they're focusing on their direct ancestors when they're doing this. So the eternal family, which is incredibly important in a Latter-day Saint context, and being sealed to those you love, to not just anticipate that in the life to come, but to also see how you can impact that in previous lives and in those who've gone before us. And I understand why that belief is important.
One thing I find interesting and surprising is the need to maintain a temple recommend in order to enter the temple. I don't think I realized that you had to almost like maintain that, and that you had to do certain things, that the tithing was required, wearing temple garments was required, other ordinances are required. And so I don't know that we have something like that feels like in our faith that we have to do in order to.
Yeah, not in a Protestant context. And I think this is one of the reasons why Latter-day Saints are branded as like a works-based salvation. And the reason why that is not accurate is because those are things that are required to maintain the temple recommend, but this is so they can do work on behalf of the dead. And it also is tied into more of their exaltation as opposed to salvation, where Latter-day Saints technically believe very closely in a universalistic type of salvation, that almost everybody is going to go to heaven. They'll just exist in one of 3 degrees of glory. So all of that kind of touches on unique doctrines to a Latter-day Saint paradigm that is very much outside of a mainstream line of thinking when it comes to Orthodox biblical belief.
Sometimes I feel like for me, therapy in some ways feels like I'm baptizing the dead as I take into that room, which I do consider that a sacred practice. And as I enter into those spaces with generational trauma and what I believe to be generational sin, I do think there's opportunities to take our wounds into those spaces and not baptize, but like in a sense, I'm wanting to bring new life to places where I've experienced harm or grief or death. And so it's kind of a separate thought, but that's one thing that I'm like, well, in some ways I feel like I'm connected, a lot of things I've experienced in my life are connected to the generation before me and the generation before that. And I do see the impact that my life has on the generation, on my kids, and then they're on their kids. So
yeah. The next thing that was incredibly shocking to me, and whenever I communicate this to other evangelicals, I also see their jaws drop. It's whenever I come into the understanding or explain the understanding of the Latter-day Saint belief in what took place in the Garden of Eden. Now, this is something that might seem like an overly nuanced layer of doctrine and theology, but the reality is, for a Protestant evangelical, and for Catholics for that matter, looking at what took place in the Garden of Eden really impacts all of our doctrines. So whenever I was told that Latter-day Saints believe in a premortal existence, and that we as the literal offspring of Heavenly Father were sent to earth, that Adam and Eve, being the first ones here, were deceived by the adversary or Satan, who is their spirit brother, as he is the spirit brother of Jesus, that Eve, partaking of the fruit, was actually a good thing or a necessary thing in order for Adam and Eve's eyes to be open to the knowledge of good and evil, and they could understand what is necessary for them to get on that path of eternal progression towards exaltation, the Latter-day Saint plan of salvation. In a mainstream Christian context, the garden is actually the most tragic, awful, horrible, disappointing thing shameful thing that has ever taken place in all of human existence. Yeah, so I'm curious to know if whenever you learned about a Latter-day Saint understanding of the Garden of Eden, if that shocked you as well.
I don't know if I would say shocked, but it feels very important because they're like the opposite thing. And we're basing a lot of beliefs on that premise.
Right.
Both of us.
Right. And it does share the explanation as to why there is sin in the world. So there's agreement there. But beyond what Jesus did, there's still an onus on a human to receive a plan of salvation in order to be worthy through these saving ordinances, is what they call them, for the highest level of glory, of exaltation in the celestial kingdom. So all of that is very different from a mainstream Christian biblical paradigm, because we believe when Adam and Eve fell, that God immediately started a rescue mission that was enacted initially through certain preservations and covenants that he made with Noah and Abraham, but eventually through his chosen people of Israel in the sacrificial system before Jesus, who is the Lamb that takes away the sins of the world, was really the one who brought us back into full, complete, reconciled relationship with God. So that has a pretty big impact on our understanding of God's mission for mankind.
Another thing that is shocking is probably simply that a lot of Latter-day Saints wear temple garments.
Underneath their clothing.
Underneath their clothing every day.
Yeah, that's something that I didn't know about, and whenever it was explained to me, initially, again, it's something that seems very unfamiliar and uncommon. And this is actually one of the things that I get a little bit annoyed with, that people will make fun of Latter-day Saints for doing this, which I think is incredibly disrespectful, because this is something that's important to them. And as Latter-day Saints explain it to me, it's a reminder for them when it comes to the promises that they made. It's just like a physical reminder of some of those sacred things that are dear to them.
Yeah, I remember reading an article one time years ago about a woman who was Islamic who constantly was made fun of and disrespected because she wore Islamic coverings, and she was expressing that it actually is a really sacred thing that she practices, and it's a way to be obedient and show her faith, and she actually prefers to wear them. She doesn't feel like she's being suppressed to have to wear them.
Yeah. Again, this is like a huge pet peeve I have whenever evangelicals or mainstream Christians make fun of Latter-day Saints for doing this, and they even use really disparaging terms, because they don't speak that way about a Jew who wears a yarmulke or Muslims who wear the covering. So this is something that, even though we don't practice, we don't think is necessary in a orthodox biblical paradigm, that we should in some way be making fun of or demeaning something that's sacred to Latter-day Saints.
Yeah. Why do you think that is, that it's almost easier to be understanding towards an Islamic culture or a Jewish culture that wears different things versus the Latter-day Saint culture?
It's kind of hard to say, because some of it just might have to do with the historic dynamic that exists between Latter-day Saints and evangelicals. But I also think it might have something to do with the fact that Latter-day Saints are a smaller group, whereas Jews, that's a worldwide collection of people, or Muslims, I mean, that is the second largest religious base of humanity. So
yeah.
I think that for some reason we feel we can, pick on the little guy on the playground.
Do you think it could also have to do with the fact that the garments are something that are private and unseen versus the other garments being something that are
like external,
for everyone to see?
Yeah, potentially. But either way, we just shouldn't make fun of it.
No.
Yeah. The last thing on my list of things that shock me, and I think shock a lot of evangelicals, is tied to what we had just talked about a minute ago with the Garden of Eden. That is this premortal existence and an understanding that Heavenly Father, who is God, is a distinct person from Jesus, so a non-Trinitarian view. Furthermore, that he has a wife referred to as Heavenly Mother, and they don't have a lot of teaching around Heavenly Mother, but that we are all the spiritual offspring of a Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother, and that they at one point, being human, were existing in a way that was much like how we exist now. So that really does start to reach into an area that when I explain that to mainstream Christians, they are pretty shocked because we don't have that type of understanding of a premortal existence in our paradigm. So in our paradigm, we believe that we were created in God's image, but that he is a transcendent being. He is outside of time and space, which is what makes the incarnation so powerful and beautiful, that he became flesh. He became a baby. That's how much he loves us and wants us in restored relationship with him. But our origin, our essence, is not tied to us being the offspring of a Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother, but that we were created in God's image. There's a lot more that gets into those beliefs that I'll probably touch on in other videos, but that's definitely a distinct belief. All right, so now let's talk about the things that we have learned about Latter-day Saint belief or culture that has induced a sort of holy envy, or these are things that we appreciate, or maybe even things that we wish existed in our paradigm.
I would say, and we haven't finished this video yet, we have it half recorded, but we went to go visit Welfare Square, and that just was a very clear picture of how incredibly well they do stewarding their resources. I was really moved by our time there to see their benevolence and their kindness and the ways in which they consider all of humanity as deserving of having their needs met, is a really powerful, beautiful thing. And I think I see that on a large scale and on a small scale in the Latter-day Saint church and culture.
Yeah.
That there's this very generous, kind, benevolent spirit.
Yeah, and that's not to say that doesn't exist.
It does.
Evangelical Christianity or Catholics. There's plenty of that takes place, but we're so large and there's so many different denominations. It happens in various different pieces, but to see how intricate and how intentional the Latter-day Saints strategy is when it comes to, I like the word that you use, stewarding their resources in a way that helps others. It is something that makes me really respect how the church handles that.
And we were at an event yesterday where someone was sharing that Utah was ranked the highest in generosity, not just in their financial offerings and giving, but also in their time, which to me is almost more impressive, that people are actually showing up, not just writing checks, but people are volunteering and giving their time. And so there's just a generosity that comes, I really do believe in the culture and the beliefs of the church that creates and kind of facilitates that type of living.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for me, this gets a little bit more into ecclesiology and how the church is structured. But one of the things that I think is a strong suit of the church is that they do put a pretty clear emphasis on authority. The authority structure in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is something that is pretty clear. Again, like it or not, there's always clarity on how things work through the First Presidency, the Quorum of the 12, the Quorum of the 70, how on a stake and ward level, how those lines of authority work and how you need to function in your calling within those authoritative structures. And I know that even gets into some doctrinal beliefs tied to priesthood, which I don't totally subscribe to in that sense. But just practically speaking, I think that there's a strong
system.
Yeah, there's a strong system of structure there that I think a lot of evangelical denominations could probably learn from. I think the last thing that I've been recognizing is how the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints really demonstrates an openness to connecting with people of other faiths and other religions. So being that evangelicals are the prominent group in America, Protestant evangelicals, we are pretty comfortable when it comes to connecting with other denominations. But when it comes to people who have vastly different beliefs or practices, there's not quite as much of an openness to connect. I think the one exception might be with Jews, especially with Messianic Jews. There's probably some openness to connecting there. Whereas the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has been demonstrating to me an openness to connect with other faiths. And I don't know if that has always been practiced. I think that Joseph Smith taught things in that vein back in the day. But the reputation of Latter-day Saints for many, many decades was that they were very insular. They were very inward focused. But over the past 10 to 20 years, they've become more outwardly focused and actually desiring to connect with other people of faith.
And we have experienced, just in connecting with so many people, not just an openness, but a real intentionality to connect and to help all people.
Yeah. I mean, and really at the end of the day, I think that's why Hello Saints is resonating with so many Latter-day Saints, because there is a willingness and an openness to having conversations with someone who's not like them, as long as it's done with respect and with dignity. And it's a safe space for us to sort of exchange what we believe and to understand one another better.
I would agree, and I would say we have also experienced, from the evangelical perspective, people being surprised at how well received
Very true.
you've been and Hello Saints has been, because I think there's an expectation that it would be threatening.
Right.
And it would be shut down.
Yeah, which some people do see it as threatening, but most Latter-day Saints see it as a constructive conversation. All right, so there's our list of things that shock us and things that we respect about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And maybe you've got some thoughts about this. You can leave a comment down in the comment section.
Keep it nice.
Keep it nice. Keep it respectful. In fact, maybe there's some things you've learned about Protestant evangelicals that shock you or that you've come to appreciate. Leave a comment down in the comment section. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, support us on Patreon. So thanks for being in the conversation.
Thanks for having me, Pastor Jeff.
Okay. And come back for more videos. So until next time, we'll see you later, Saints.